This story is based on the murders committed by Richard Speck in 1966. On the night of July 13th, 1966, 8 student nurses were staying in a townhouse on Chicago's South Side. They were young, most in their early 20s, living together while completing their training at a nearby hospital. It was supposed to be a normal night. Some of them had just gotten back from work, others were getting ready for bed. Nothing unusual. The doors were locked, the neighborhood was quiet. It was just another summer night. Sometime after midnight, there was a knock at the door. One of the nurses answered it. Standing outside was a man holding a knife. His name was Richard Speck. He forced his way inside almost immediately. At first, there was confusion, shock, people trying to process what was happening, but it escalated quickly. He gathered the nurses into one room. One by one, he began taking them out. What made this case especially disturbing wasn't just what happened, it was how controlled it was. He didn't rush, he moved deliberately, calmly, as if he had already decided exactly how that night was going to go. Inside that townhouse, the other nurses could hear what was happening: footsteps, doors opening and closing, then silence. Then it would start again. One of the nurses, Corazon Amaro, realized what was happening before the others fully understood. At some point, she slipped out of sight and hid. She crawled under a bed and stayed there for hours. She didn't move, didn't speak, didn't make a single sound, even as everything unfolded around her. Speck never found her. By morning, 8 nurses were dead. She was the only one left alive in the house. When the police arrived, she was still hiding, too afraid to come out, not knowing if he had really left. Her survival came down to a single decision: hiding at the exact moment she did. If she had hesitated, even briefly, the outcome likely would have been different. Speck was arrested days later, not because of a massive manhunt breakthrough, but because he showed up at a hospital after attempting to take his own life. A doctor recognized his tattoos from the news reports. That's how it ended. What stays with people about this case isn't just the violence, it's how ordinary everything was right before it happened. A shared home, a locked door, a routine night, something normal, almost in every single household. There was no warning, no build up, just a knock, and the realization, too late, that someone had already decided what was going to happen inside. This is one of those real cases that reminds people, most of the time, danger doesn't look dramatic when it arrives. It looks like a normal moment right before everything changes. This story is based on the murder of Sylvia Likens. In the summer of 1965, 2 teenage sisters were left in the care of a woman named Gertrude Blanzowski in Indianapolis. Their parents were traveling and needed someone to watch them temporarily. It seemed like a simple arrangement: a trusted home, a temporary stay. One of the girls was Sylvia Likens. She was 16. At first, the house looked normal from the outside. A quiet neighborhood, a typical suburban setting. Nothing about it suggested what was about to happen inside. But over time, the environment inside that house began to change. It didn't happen all at once, it escalated gradually. At first, it was verbal mistreatment, then control over basic needs. Food became limited, movement became restricted, and isolation increased. The situation tightened day by day. What made this case so disturbing to investigators later was not just one person's actions, but how many people were aware of what was happening inside that home. Neighbors, visitors, even children in the household. Yet for a long time, nothing stopped it. Sylvia was confined to the house for weeks. As time passed, she became weaker physically, and the control over her environment became total. She was isolated from outside contact completely. Eventually, authorities were alerted, but by the time intervention happened, it was too late. She died on October 26, 1965. When police entered the home, they found a situation that shocked even experienced investigators. The evidence inside revealed prolonged abuse and multiple individuals involved at different levels. The case went to trial, and several people were convicted. What makes this case stay with people isn't just the outcome, it's how long it continued in a normal looking house, in a normal neighborhood, with people around who either didn't intervene or didn't fully understand what was happening until it was over. It's a reminder that sometimes the most disturbing situations don't happen in isolation, they happen in plain sight. This next story is very interesting, and one that shocks many people. It's based on the crimes of Ted Bundy. In the 1970s, across the United States, young women began to disappear under similar circumstances. There was no obvious pattern at first, no clear connection, just reports of women leaving their homes or public places and never returning. The man responsible was later identified to be Ted Bundy, but at the time, he was just another face in a crowd. What made Ted Bundy particularly difficult to identify early on was how he appeared to be normal. He was educated, well spoken, charismatic, the kind of person who could just blend in easily into professional environments and social spaces without raising suspicion. The ability to appear ordinary became one of his most dangerous tools. He often used deception to gain trust in public places. In some cases, he would approach victims in familiar environments where people naturally let their guard down. Witnesses who later survived described a similar pattern: a calm approach, a request for help or interaction, and then a shift in control once trust was briefly established. Many of his crimes were committed in different states, which made it difficult for law enforcement agencies at the time to immediately connect the cases. Communication between jurisdictions was limited, and the pattern only became clearer after multiple investigations overlapped. As the investigation progressed, authorities began to realize they were dealing with someone who was not operating in a single area, but moving across different regions, making identification significantly harder. Eventually, Bundy was arrested after a series of unrelated events. Even after his arrest, investigations continued to connect him to additional cases over time. He was later convicted and executed in 1989. What makes this case so widely discussed is not just the crimes themselves, but the contrast between appearance and reality. A person who could appear completely ordinary in everyday life while leading a completely separate, hidden pattern of violent behavior. It challenged assumptions about how danger is recognized, because in many cases, there were no obvious signs until after the fact. A handsome, charismatic, and social person was not someone who anybody thought they were. Richard Beasley didn't start out as someone people feared. In fact, at different points in his life, he was seen as a mentor figure. He had connections in his community, spoke with confidence, and knew how to gain people's trust, especially younger, more vulnerable individuals. By 2011, his life had spiraled. Financial problems, instability, depression, and desperation pushed him towards something darker. That's when he came up with a plan. Beasley began posting fake job listings on Craigslist. They advertised farm work in rural Ohio. Good pay, housing included. For people struggling financially, it sounded like a second chance. Men started responding. One of them was a 51-year-old man, just trying to get back on his feet. Another was younger, hopeful, looking for steady work. They would arrive expecting opportunity. Instead, they were led into isolated areas. What makes this case especially chilling is that Beasley didn't act alone. He brought a teenage boy into it, someone who looked up to him. The teen later said he initially believed that they were just meeting people for work, but things escalated. The victims were targeted, robbed, and killed in remote locations, places where no one would hear or see anything. What broke the case open was a survivor. One man managed to escape after being shot. Injured, he ran through woods, through fear, and got help. That moment changed everything. Police were able to trace the pattern back to Beasley. When they searched the rural area, they uncovered the truth behind the job offers. Beasley wasn't just luring people, he was hunting them. The most disturbing part, it wasn't just random chaos, it was planned, calculated, and built on something simple: trust. Everyone trusted him. On Seymour Avenue in Cleveland, Ariel Castro was just another neighbor. He played music, talked to people, blended in. Nothing about him stood out. He was just an average person. That's what made it so disturbing. Between 2002 and 2004, three young women, Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, and Gina DeJesus, disappeared in the same area. Families searched, communities hoped, years passed, people assumed the worst, but they were still there, inside his house, hidden in plain sight. Castro had built a system: locked doors, covered windows, controlled movement. He lived his normal life outside while hiding a horrifying reality inside. Neighbors later said they had never expected anything beyond his behavior: music playing loudly, a house that always felt closed off, but nothing that seemed dangerous or disturbing. In 2013, everything changed. Amanda Berry managed to reach a door and call for help. A neighbor heard her, police arrived, and within minutes, a decade-long nightmare was exposed. While this case is often remembered as a kidnapping story, its connection to murder is what makes it even more haunting. Authorities believe Castro intended for the victims to never leave alive. The plan wasn't temporary, it was permanent. The most chilling part of this case isn't just what happened inside the house. It's this: for years, people walked past that house, never expected anything, drove by it, lived next to it, and they had no idea the whole time. In the late 1970s, two men crossed paths and created something far more dangerous together. Lawrence Brittaker and Roy Norris both had troubled pasts, criminal records, histories of violence, and time in prison. On their own, they were already unstable. Together, they became something much, much worse. They drove around Southern California in a van. To most people, it was an ordinary van, but inside it was modified, prepared. They targeted teenage girls, often hitchhikers, people who were vulnerable and alone. Norris was the talker. Brittaker was quieter, colder. That dynamic worked in a very terrifying way. One gained trust, the other carried out control. What makes this case especially disturbing isn't just the crimes, it's how deliberate everything was. They planned, recorded, kept track. It wasn't impulsive, it was planned, calculated. Eventually, Norris began to unravel. Fear, guilt, self preservation, something pushed him to confess. His testimony exposed everything. Brittaker, on the other hand, never showed remorse in the same way. He remained detached, almost analytical about what he had done. This case is often cited by investigators as one of the most disturbing partnerships in criminal history, not because it was the most widely known, but because of how calculated it was. Two people with no hesitation.